I was at a small dinner party a few weeks ago, the kind where everyone is leaning in, laughing at stories, and keeping the conversation light. In the middle of it all, I noticed a woman sitting near the end of the table. She wasn't particularly loud, but she was intensely present. While everyone else was focused on the punchline of a joke, I saw her gaze flicker toward a couple across from her. She didn't say anything, but her expression tightened for a split second. She had caught the sharp, cold look the husband gave his wife when she interrupted him, a look that vanished as quickly as it appeared. While the rest of the room stayed in that comfortable, social blur, she seemed to be processing the evening in high definition. She wasn't just hearing the words, she was tracking the dissonances. The way a laugh didn't reach someone's eyes, the heavy silence that followed a seemingly innocent comment. By the time dessert was served, the others were energized, but she looked utterly depleted. Her movements were slower, her smile looked like a mask she was struggling to keep pinned in place. She wasn't ill, and she wasn't difficult. She was simply exhausted by the sheer volume of what she was perceiving. We often talk about understanding as a goal, a privilege, or a sign of intelligence. But for a certain group of people, understanding doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a weight. It's the exhaustion of a mind that sees the cracks in the foundation long before the walls start to shake. They spot the violence hidden under polite sentences and the fear tucked away in a confident stride. This isn't a fatigue born from a lack of courage or physical frailty. It's a vigilance fatigue, a bone-deep weariness that comes from a brain that lacks the usual filters, a consciousness that simply doesn't know how to shut down when the world becomes incoherent. Why is it that for some, seeing the truth clearly is the very thing that makes it so hard to live in the world? What is the real price of a clarity that arrives too early? And why does our society mistake this profound perception for a weakness?
Wow. That's heavy. Just hearing you read that, I can feel the weight in that room. It just captures something so specific, something we rarely put into words. And that phrase you ended with, vigilance fatigue.
It hits hard.
It really does. I think that's the perfect anchor for everything we're going to unpack in this deep dive.
It felt so important to start there because I think we've all had moments where we felt like that woman, or maybe more often, we've been the other people at the table.
The ones laughing at the joke.
And exactly, totally oblivious, while someone else is carrying this incredible burden of seeing what's actually happening under the surface.
And that's the core conflict, isn't it? It's the friction between these two completely different ways of being.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, you have what I've started calling social comfort.
The blur.
The blur. It's the dinner party blur. It's the polite fiction that lets us get through the day, lets us work in an office, lets us, stay in relationships. It relies on a certain amount of blindness. You have to ignore the husband's cold look to keep the conversation flowing.
Right. I mean, if you stop the dinner party every time you sensed a microaggression or a lie, the party would be over in, 5 minutes?
But then on the other side of that, you have high-definition reality.
The unfiltered data stream.
It's the raw truth of the interaction.
Right.
The power dynamics, the hidden resentments, the unspoken anxieties. The woman at the table, she is living in high-definition reality. And the price she pays for that is just sheer exhaustion.
And what's wild is how we react to that. When we see someone like her, someone who gets depleted by a social gathering or someone who seems to take things too seriously, we pathologize them. We immediately jump to, oh, she's too sensitive.
Or she's just socially awkward.
And she's to relax. Don't be so intense.
We treat it like it's a personal failing,
a
character flaw, a lack of resilience. But the stack of research I've been digging through for this deep dive suggests something radically different. It suggests this isn't some psychological quirk that affects a few sensitive people. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of a much deeper systemic rot.
So she isn't the problem. The dinner party is the problem.
Or, to scale it up, the world has become a giant high-stakes version of that dinner party. We've built our modern institutions, our corporations, our hospitals, our government agencies. They're all specifically designed to filter out high-definition reality.
In favor of social comfort.
In favor of polite ambiguity. We actively reward the people who can ignore the cold look from the husband. We promote the people who are best at maintaining the blur.
And what happens to the people who can't, the ones who see the cracks in the foundation?
They get crushed. They burn out. They get sick. They're pushed out. We're going to explore. We're going to look at how this dynamic creates a very specific kind of soft violence.
Soft violence.
And the soft violence, it has real-world consequences. It drains our national productivity, it destroys our physical health, and it genuinely threatens the stability of our infrastructure.
Yeah.
This isn't just about feelings. This is about why bridges fall down and why innovation grinds to a halt.
The workplace, the body, and the state.
Exactly. The office, the cell, and the society.
And I think we have to start with the workplace, because that's where this polite ambiguity does so much of the most visible damage. It's where our ability to just get things done is being eroded.
It really is the engine room of the dysfunction.
We have a story here that I think just it encapsulates this whole problem perfectly. It's about a man.
Okay.
Now, Thomas isn't some junior employee. He's a highly qualified researcher working at a very prestigious European institute. And the institute's stated mission is sustainable innovation.
Sounds great on a brochure.
Yeah.
Very noble.
It sounds like the kind of place that would crave high-definition thinking. And Thomas is that guy. He has that rare ability to see the architectural flaws in a project almost immediately. He can look at a proposal and say, the math doesn't work here, or this regulatory hurdle is going to kill us in 6 months.
He's the one who sees the cracks long before the walls start to shake.
100%.
Yeah.
But here's the reality of his day-to-day life. He isn't spending his time fixing those cracks. He's spending his time in what the Institute calls alignment meetings.
Alignment. It's so corporate, so benign. It sounds so productive.
But for Thomas, it was a torture chamber. He described finding himself sitting in these fluorescent lit rooms hour after hour, listening to people discuss projects that he knew with mathematical certainty were doomed.
You can see the iceberg, and everyone else was rearranging the deck chairs.
And the unspoken rule of the Institute was positive framing. You couldn't just stand up and say, this is a bad idea and it will fail. No, you had to build on the concept. You had to find something positive to say. You had to use the right buzzwords.
So the goal of the meeting wasn't to find the truth.
Oh.
The goal was to maintain the social cohesion of the group, to make sure everyone felt heard and validated, even if their ideas were nonsense.
And Thomas described it as a soft violence. Nobody was yelling at him. Nobody was physically threatening him, but he was being forced to suppress his perception of reality for 8 hours a day. He had to sit there and pretend the emperor was fully clothed when he could clearly see he was naked.
And that cognitive dissonance, what did it do to him?
It broke him, not physically at first, but creatively. The cognitive load of maintaining that facade, of constantly having to translate his high-definition truth into low-definition corporate speak, it just brained him out completely.
He stopped contributing.
He stopped proposing ideas. He withdrew in meetings. He just became a ghost in the machine collecting a paycheck.
This is a perfect, tragic example of what we mean by the drain on innovation. We think innovation comes from smart people having good ideas. If the social environment punishes you for pointing out that a bad idea is bad, the smart people just shut up.
It really validates so much of the critique you hear about Western decadence or economic stagnation. It's like, we have all these resources, all this talent, but we're just spinning our wheels in these endless meetings.
And to really understand why Thomas burned out, we need to look at the mechanics of this. It's not just that his boss was annoying or that the culture was fluffy, it's structural. And this is where I want to bring in a fascinating paper by a researcher named Wright from 2025. It's called Institutional Noise.
I think I remember seeing the abstract for this. It's about Bitcoin mining. That seems like a bit of a left turn.
Now, stick with me on this. It sounds completely unrelated, but I swear, it is the skeleton key for understanding what happened in Thomas's office.
How does cryptocurrency explain the dysfunction at a European research institute?
So, Wright uses this really elegant game theory model to compare two different types of systems. On one hand, you have a system like Bitcoin, and in that system, the rules are immutable.
Unchangeable.
Right. They are math, they are fixed code, they're set in stone. You can't argue with the blockchain. You can't take the algorithm out for a drink and try to convince it to give you a break.
Right. The protocol doesn't care if you're polite. Doesn't care who your dad is.
It doesn't care about any of that. It only cares about one thing, proof of work. So if you want to win in that system, if you want to mine a block, you have to be productive. You have to invest in better hardware, find cheaper energy, design more efficient processes. You have to actually do the thing.
Okay, so that's a system where reality, or at least the mathematical reality, is the only thing that matters. Performance is all that counts.
Correct. Now, let's compare that to Thomas's institute. That is a system with mutable rules.
Squishy rules.
Very squishy. The rules are subject to human discretion. They change based on office politics, based on who the CEO's favorite is this week, based on the manager's mood, based on the latest social trend that everyone has to performatively follow.
The goalposts are always moving.
And Wright's paper argues that when you introduce that mutability into a system, the optimal strategy for any rational actor changes completely. It flips 180 degrees. Well, if I'm Thomas, and I know that the rules can be changed, or that the very definition of success can be shifted by a quiet conversation in the hallway, am I going to invest my energy in production? Am I going to spend 3 months doing the hard science?
Because doing the science is hard, it's risky.
And it might not even pay off. If the director decides he doesn't like the results because they're inconvenient, all that work is for nothing. So instead of production, I invest my energy in what Wright calls metastrategic behavior.
Which is just a fancy academic way of saying lobbying.
Lobbying, schmoozing, signaling, posturing, all of it. I invest my energy in influencing the rule makers rather than actually playing the game by the supposed rules.
So I spend 3 hours making the PowerPoint slide look professional and using all the right fonts.
Instead of spending 3 hours actually analyzing the data on the slide, I spend my lunch break laughing at the director's bad jokes instead of running experiments.
Because that's what actually determines your survival in a mutable system. Not the quality of your work, but the quality of your performance.
And this is the soft violence that Thomas was feeling. He was a proof of work guy stuck in a proof of politics system. He wanted to do the science, but the institution was demanding he do the song and dance.
And the tragedy is, Thomas is a rational guy. He eventually realized that in that environment, doing good, honest work was actually a bad strategy. It was a waste of his energy.
And that leads to what Wright calls the collapse of calculability. It means you can no longer calculate the return on your effort.
Cause and effect are broken.
The link is severed. If you work hard, will you get promoted? Maybe not. It depends on whether you aligned correctly in the last meeting. And the human brain hates that uncertainty. We are wired to seek cause and effect. When that link is broken, when we can't predict the outcome of our actions, we check out, we disengage.
That's the vigilance fatigue again. It's the exhaustion of trying to navigate a maze where the walls are constantly silently shifting around you.
Now think about the macro impact of this. If you have an entire nation or an entire economy where the smartest people, the Thomases of the world, are forced to spend 80% of their cognitive energy on metastrategic behavior, on politics, on alignment, on signaling.
And only 20% on actual production.
You get stagnation. You get a lot of beautiful reports about innovation, but no actual innovation.
You get the world David Graeber warned us about with his theory of bullshit job.
Exactly. Graeber talked about this rise of managerial feudalism. It's the creation of these endless layers of administration whose only job is to manage the process of the work, rather than doing the work itself.
The box tickers, the report fillers.
Of flunkies, the taskmasters.
Okay.
And Graeber made a point that I think is crucial. He called this spiritual violence. He argued that human beings are fundamentally creative. We are wired to want to affect the world. We want to build things, fix things, make things.
We want to see our work mean something.
Yes. And when you force a person to sit in a room and pretend that a useless form is important or that a doomed project is a good idea, you are attacking their dignity at a fundamental level. You're telling them that their own perception of reality is wrong.
You are, in a sense, gaslighting them.
It's institutional gaslighting on a mass scale. And for someone like Thomas, who sees it so clearly, it becomes unbearable. So he quits. Or, even worse for the economy, he stays, collects his paycheck, and just stops caring.
And that is how a civilization loses its edge. Not with a bang, but with an endless series of alignment meetings.
It's terrifying because it feels so mundane, doesn't it? It's just boring meetings and polite emails. But when you aggregate it across an entire society, it's a catastrophe.
And that catastrophe doesn't just stay in the conference room. It doesn't just live on a spreadsheet. It comes home with you.
It lives in your body.
Which brings us to the second dimension of this problem, the biological cost, the physical price of living in the blur.
And this is where we need to talk about the story of Elena.
Yeah, the story of Elena it was hard to read.
It's brutal.
I found this account in a collection of case studies. They were looking into something they called social dissonance syndrome. Elena was a mid-level manager in a huge healthcare administration system, a big Western bureaucracy. She wasn't a doctor or a nurse. She was one of the administrators tasked with bridging the gap between the medical staff on the front lines and the executives in the C-suite.
A classic bridge role. That's always high pressure, high ambiguity.
Always. And she worked in an environment that was just defined by polite ambiguity. The executives, they wanted reports that showed everything was going great, green lights on all the dashboards, positive trends, happy stakeholders.
But the reality on the ground was different.
The reality was the medical staff screaming that they were understaffed, overworked, and drowning. So Elena's job was to take that chaotic, screaming reality and translate it into a polite green light PowerPoint presentation for the board.
She had to metabolize the dissonance of the entire organization.
And for a while she did. She was very good at it. She was known as a fixer. She could smooth over any ruffled feathers, manage any crisis. But direct, result-oriented communication, actually saying, this part of the system is broken and we need to fix it now, that was seen as aggressive.
Not a team player.
Exactly. So she had to wear the mask every single day.
And what was the cost for her? What was the price of that mask?
Her body just fell apart. And we're not talking about just feeling tired or stressed. She developed chronic, debilitating insomnia. Her blood pressure spiked and wouldn't come down, even with medication. She developed a persistent neurological tremor in her hands.
Wow.
And eventually her doctor told her that her cortisol levels were effectively flatlining. Her entire stress response system was just broken.
This is a textbook clinical case of what medical researchers call allostatic overload.
I really want to dig into that term. We hear the word stress all the time. I'm so stressed. But this is something different, isn't it? It's a more precise diagnosis.
It's fundamentally different, and understanding the difference is key. To get it, you have to distinguish between two concepts, homeostasis and allostasis.
Okay, homeostasis is the one we learn about in high school biology. It's about balance, the body's thermostat.
Right. Think of it like a normal day. You get a little cold, so your body shivers, you warm up, you stop shivering,
Yeah.
You get scared by a loud noise, your heart jumps, you realize it's just the cat. Your heart slows down again. That loop, a stressor, a reaction, and then a recovery back to baseline, that's homeostasis. It's sustainable.
The system resets to zero.
Exactly. Now, imagine the threat doesn't go away. Imagine you're not just startled by a cat, you're being chased by a lion. Your body doesn't get to reset. It has to maintain a high level of alert.
It has to adapt to a new normal of high stress.
That active process of adaptation, of maintaining stability through change, is allostasis. I like the analogy of driving a car up a steep hill. To maintain your speed, you can't just cruise. You have to rev the engine harder. You have to inject more fuel, pump the pistons faster. Allostasis is your body revving its engine to meet a sustained demand.
Okay, so allostasis isn't inherently bad. It's the system that allows us to survive crises.
It's a brilliant life-saving system. But Elena isn't in a temporary crisis. She's in a career. She is in a permanent state of allostasis. She is revving her biological engine to the red line every single day just to bridge the gap between the truth from the nurses and the lie she has to tell the executives.
She is holding the entire organization together with her own nervous system.
And just like a car engine, if you redline it for 5 years straight without ever letting it cool down, you're going to blow a gasket. You're going to wear out the parts. That accumulated wear and tear on the body from chronic adaptation, that is allostatic load.
So the tremor, the high blood pressure, the flatlining cortisol, that's the engine smoking and sputtering.
It is the biological bill coming due. And the research is crystal clear on this. It is biologically unsustainable. You cannot maintain a high-definition mind in a low-definition world without paying a steep physical price.
And there's a gendered component to this that we can't ignore. The sources we looked at discuss something called the female-male health survival paradox.
The epidemiological data has shown for a long time that, on average, women tend to live longer than men, but they also live with higher rates of morbidity.
More sickness, more chronic illness.
More disability, more autoimmune issues, more chronic pain. They live longer, but sicker. And a lot of researchers believe this comes down to role strain and different coping mechanisms.
So in many organizations, women are still implicitly expected to be the social glue.
They're often the ones, just like Elena, who are expected to manage the emotional climate of the room. They're expected to do the bulk of the emotional labor.
Right, if a meeting gets tense, the woman in the room is often looked at to diffuse it. If a boss is angry, she's expected to soothe him.
And this social pressure leads to a greater reliance on what psychologists call emotion-focused coping.
Okay, so what's the alternative to that?
The alternative is problem-focused coping. So problem-focused coping is, the pipe is leaking, I'm going to get my tools and I'm going to fix the pipe. Stressor identified, problem solved, stress over.
Simple, direct.
Emotion-focused coping is, the pipe is leaking, but I work in a system where I'm not allowed to admit the pipe is leaking because that would make my boss look bad, so I can't fix the pipe. Instead, I have to manage my own anxiety about the impending flood, and I have to manage everyone else's annoyance about the water on the floor.
You're managing the reaction to the problem, not the problem itself.
Because the environment is mutable. Because telling the truth is punished. You can't fix the problem directly. So you turn all that stress inward, you absorb it, and that internalizes the allostatic load at a much higher rate.
It reminds me of that McKinsey Health Institute report from 2023. They had this graphic that's really stuck with me of the healthcare matrix.
That was a very striking image. It really reframed the whole conversation.
Their argument was that we traditionally treat health as just the absence of disease. So as long as Elena doesn't have a diagnosed tumor, our system considers her healthy. But McKinsey's point was that true health is about function. Can you function? Can you live your life? And Elena clearly couldn't.
And the absolute kicker from that report was the cause. They crunched the numbers from huge global surveys, and they found that toxic workplace behavior was the single biggest predictor of burnout symptoms.
Not just a factor, the biggest one.
The biggest one. It was 7 times more predictive than any other factor they looked at.
7 times.
Yes, more predictive than number of hours worked. More predictive than salary. More predictive than anything else.
Wow.
And toxic in this context doesn't just mean a boss screaming at you. It includes things like role ambiguity. It includes lack of organizational justice. And crucially, it includes feeling that you cannot be your authentic self.
So polite ambiguity is toxic behavior.
Biologically, yes. If you have to hide your true perception of reality for 10 hours a day, that is toxic to your nervous system. Stop.
It makes all the corporate wellness initiatives feel so incredibly cynical, doesn't it? Here's a meditation app, Elena. Just breathe deeply through the tremor while you finish that misleading report.
It's the illusion of wellness. We offer these flimsy individual solutions to massive structural problems. We tell Elena to do yoga when what she actually needs is an organization where she can tell the truth without being labeled aggressive or difficult. She doesn't need a mindfulness app. She needs a reality-based workflow.
So we have the mind checking out, that's Thomas, and we have the body breaking down, that's Elena. But if you zoom out even further, you start to see that this culture of endurance and masking eventually causes the physical world to break down too. The infrastructure itself fails.
This brings us to Marcus, and this is where the stakes become life and death.
Marcus's story is about infrastructure. He's a civil engineer, and he was tasked with overseeing a massive project, a billion-dollar bridge replacement in a declining metropolitan area.
High stakes, high visibility, a lot of political pressure.
A ton. And from the very beginning, Marcus saw the flaws. He's another high-definition perceiver. He looked at the plans and saw that the budget was based on optimistic fantasies. He saw that the timeline completely ignored supply chain realities. He saw that the staffing levels were dangerously, negligently low.
He saw the truth.
He saw the truth. But the culture of his government department was built on this idea of individual endurance. It was that macho can-do attitude. If you pointed out a problem, you were being negative. If you said the timeline was impossible, you lacked grit.
Grit. That word has been so weaponized in the last decade.
So Marcus did what a good employee is supposed to do. He endured. He started working 80-hour weeks. He personally covered for the missing staff members. He massaged the weekly progress reports to make the impossible timeline look challenging but achievable. He wore the mask.
He was being resilient.
He was. And what happened to the bridge?
I'm guessing it didn't get built on time.
The entire project collapsed. Not physically, thank God, though that was a real risk, but administratively. It ended up being 5 years behind schedule and billions of dollars over budget. It was a complete and utter catastrophe of state capacity. And the inquiry found that it failed precisely because people like Marcus made it work for so long, hiding the deep structural problems.
This is the absolute paradox of resilience.
We have a paper here called Navigating the Neoliberal Assemblage, which is a mouthful, I know.
Yeah.
But it analyzes the response to a massive fire disaster at a place called Echo Mountain. And it argues that in the last 30 or 40 years, we have completely redefined what the word resilience means.
We have, and this is a critical distinction for anyone listening to this deep dive. Historically, resilience might have meant the capacity of a system to recover from a shock. But in the modern neoliberal context, the paper argues that the burden of resilience has been shifted away from the system and onto the individual. The privatization of risk.
her. Exactly. The state or the company doesn't provide a robust plan. It doesn't provide enough resources for the fire department. Instead, it demands that the individual citizen be resilient enough to survive the inevitable fire.
So instead of a fire department that actually works, you're expected to be a prepper who can fight the fire yourself with your own bucket.
Right. The ideal citizen becomes a self-sufficient survivalist, and Marcus was a corporate survivalist. The organization relied on his personal heroic resilience to compensate for its own structural incompetence.
It's so similar to the source we have on the veterinary profession, transforming veterinary practice.
That is a heartbreaking parallel. The vet industry has one of the highest suicide rates of any profession, and that study points directly to this ingrained culture of stoic independence.
The belief that I must carry this all alone. Yes. The idea that I have to save the animal, I have to run the business, I have to manage the client's emotions, and I have to deal with the crippling student debt. And if I can't do all of that perfectly, I am the failure, not the business model, not the system, me.
And Marcus felt that pressure. He genuinely thought that if he just worked harder, if he was more resilient, he could single-handedly save the bridge project from the bad planning.
But individual endurance always has a limit. Marcus hit his wall. And because he'd been hiding the truth for so long, because he had been so resilient, the systemic failure was completely hidden from the higher-ups until it was far too late to fix it.
This connects directly to the concept of state capacity. We have a policy paper here that contrasts resilience with another term, robustness. I think these words get used interchangeably all the time, but there's a huge difference, right?
A massive difference. And you take one thing away from this part of our conversation, let it be this distinction. Resilience, in this specific systems theory, implies survival after a shock. It implies bouncing back from failure.
Like a community rebuilding after a hurricane.
Robustness, on the other hand, is the ability of a system to maintain its performance despite the shock.
We want our power grid to be robust. We want the lights to stay on during the storm. We don't want them to go out, and then we congratulate ourselves on how resilient we were in fixing them a week later.
Exactly. We want stability. But because we have gutted our feedback loops, because people like Marcus are punished for speaking the truth, we have lost robustness. And instead, we settle for something the paper calls dynamics without change.
That's such a powerful phrase, dynamics without change.
Think of a hamster on a wheel. Think of Marcus running around answering emails at midnight, holding emergency meetings on a Saturday. That is dynamics. There's a lot of motion, a lot of sweat, a lot of energy is being burned.
It looks like progress.
It creates the illusion of progress, but there is no change. The fundamental structural flaws of the bridge project aren't being addressed. The bridge isn't actually getting built any faster or better.
It's just a performance of capacity.
We are burning human capital. We're burning Marcus's life, his health, his sanity to create a simulation of progress. And eventually, the simulation always crashes. The bridge project fails. The company goes under. And then we all stand around and wonder why.
We wonder why, but looking back at the stories of Thomas and Elena and Marcus, the answer seems so blindingly obvious. We have systematically silenced, sidelined, and sickened the very people who could have told us the truth all along.
We have broken the feedback loop. And a system that cannot hear bad news is a system that is doomed to fail.
Which brings us all the way back to the beginning, back to the woman at the dinner party. She was the feedback loop in that room. She was the one noticing the signal amidst all the social noise.
And notice what the room did to her. It ignored her. It isolated her. It exhausted her.
It feels like there's a specific mechanism of exclusion at play here. Who are these people? Why do they see things that others don't? And why does our society seem so determined to push them out?
This is where we have to talk about neurodivergence.
We have some fascinating research here on autistic STEM student mentorship and a concept called the double empathy problem.
This is really cutting-edge stuff, and it turns a lot of our old assumptions on their head. For a long time, the dominant narrative was that autistic people, or just highly sensitive people in general, lacked empathy, that they were mind blind, that they didn't understand social interaction.
Right, that was the old theory. But the double empathy theory completely flips that script.
Entirely. It says it's not a deficit, it's a mismatch. It's like a communications barrier between two different operating systems.
Okay.
The neurodivergent mind often processes information bottom up. They see the raw data first in high fidelity. They see the husband's glare. They see the budget discrepancy in the spreadsheet. They see the tiny crack in the concrete pylon. And they process that raw data as the primary reality.
They're living in high definition reality.
Whereas the Neurotypical, or socially normative mind, tends to process top-down. They prioritize the social context, the hierarchy, the vibe of the room. They see the dinner party as a dinner party, so they automatically filter out the husband's glare because it doesn't fit the script of, we're all having a pleasant evening.
So when the neurodivergent person points out the glare or the budget flaw, they aren't trying to be rude or disruptive. They are just reporting the data as they see it.
They are saying the bridge is broken. But the neurotypical listener, who is operating on a different system, hears, you are ruining the vibe of our meeting. You are making everyone uncomfortable.
And in a workplace like Thomas's or Elena's, the vibe is everything. Preserving the social comfort is the primary goal.
And that's the double empathy problem. It's a mutual incomprehension. The neurotypical mentor thinks the autistic student is being difficult and socially inept. The autistic student thinks the mentor is being illogical and dishonest by ignoring the obvious data. And because the neurotypical style is the dominant culture, the neurodivergent person almost always loses.
The paper talks about the intense emotional labor of masking.
And that is the perfect term for it. It's the constant exhausting effort of trying to translate your bottom-up, high-definition truth into a top-down, low-definition politeness that won't get you fired. How do I say this bridge is going to collapse in a way that doesn't upset the manager's fragile ego? That calculation takes a massive amount of cognitive energy. That is the vigilance fatigue.
And it's getting worse because we are automating this exclusion.
And that's the scariest part. The research highlights how hiring algorithms, the AI that sorts through resumes on platforms like LinkedIn, are being encoded with these neurotypical social biases. We filter for culture fit,
which is really just code for comfort with ambiguity and polite fiction.
We hire for enthusiasm. We hire for social grace. We hire for people who can sit in the alignment meeting and smile and nod convincingly. If a candidate comes into an interview and says, I looked at your company's code base and I found 3 major inefficiencies, they get flagged.
As not a team player, lacking soft skills.
Even though they are the single most valuable person you could possibly hire. So we are actively, systematically weeding out the whistleblowers. We are purging the immune system of our own organizations.
We're creating a monoculture of people who are very, very good at ignoring reality. We're filling the room with people who will never, ever ruin the dinner party.
And that feels great. It feels comfortable. It feels safe until the bridge falls down, or the new product fails to launch, or the pandemic hits and nobody knows how to respond to a hard truth.
That's the trade-off we've made. We have purchased social comfort at the price of robustness. We have built a world that is very pleasant to navigate if you keep your eyes closed, but very, very dangerous if you dare to open them.
It's a sobering realization to come to. We've traveled from a simple dinner party to a failing research institute to a sick hospital manager to a collapsed infrastructure project. And the single thread connecting them all is this soft violence of the norm.
It's the unspoken society-wide demand that we all pretend the system is working, even when the biological data, the economic data, the engineering data all proves that it isn't.
It's the elevation of politeness over truth, of comfort over reality.
And we've seen the cost. A catastrophic drain on innovation, the physical destruction of our most perceptive people's bodies, the slow, grinding collapse of state capacity. It's not sustainable.
It's not. Reality is undefeated. You can ignore the cortisol signals for a while, but eventually the heart gives out. You can ignore the cracks in the bridge, but eventually gravity always wins.
So if you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in the story of Thomas or Elena or Marcus, if you have ever sat in a meeting and felt that deep vibrating dissonance of this isn't real,
you're not the broken one. That exhaustion you feel, that bone-deep weariness, it isn't a weakness. It's a symptom of clarity. It's the rational response to an irrational world.
We have built a world that rewards the ability to tolerate dissonance and punishes the ability to see clearly. We call this professionalism. We call it resilience. We call it social skills. But as we look around at the stagnation in innovation, the terrifying rise in chronic illness, and the crumbling of state capacity, we have to face the uncomfortable truth. The woman at the dinner party wasn't the broken one. The exhaustion she felt was the only rational response to a world that has lost its grip on reality. The question isn't how we can help people like her adapt to the noise. It is how long the rest of us can afford to keep pretending we don't hear it.